friends, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Jackie. I hope you hit that subscribe button to be notified whenever I upload a new video. I read 19 books in September. 19. I read 19 books in September, so let's talk about it. It's going to be a long chatty one, so grab yourself a beverage and let's just jump into all the books that I read in September. All 19 of them. I did a lot of reading in September. I did not realize it until I was going through my reading journal, and it's a lot. So I have 11 physical books beside me, and I also read a lot on Kindle Unlimited. So some of the books I have physical copies of, and then some are on my Kindle. So we have my Kindle right here, and then all the books beside me. I'm not gonna lift it up until the end because you see why in my bloopers. They just fall over every single time without fail. I did, however, manage to finish most of my TBR. I think I didn't read 2, maybe 3 books that I put on my September TBR, so I did pretty good. Before we begin, I pulled up my reading journal on my iPad. I took very good notes this month on all the books that I read. The first being Behind the Net by Stephanie Archer. So Behind the Net was a typical hockey romance. I did enjoy it. I did give it 3.5 stars because technically it was just a typical hockey romance. It did take me a while to finish it because I was busy, but it is a very quick read. It has a lot of chapters, but the chapters are really short. So the hockey player's name is Jamie Streeter. I don't know. It says it throughout the book. They call him his last name, but I'm just gonna call him Jamie. He plays for the Vancouver Vipers. He moved back to Vancouver. He was originally from there, or a small town close to Vancouver, something like that, where he needs to take care of his mom. His mom is facing a lot of issues, anxiety, stuff like that. So he decides to move back and then plays for the local team. Just before he leaves, he sees this dog outside the arena or stadium, whatever you call it. I'm not a sports girly. Wherever they play the sports, he finds this abandoned dog, and he feels a responsibility to pick it up and adopt it, essentially. So just before that, his coach, I think, asked him, does he need an assistant? And he's like, no, I live by myself in this penthouse apartment, rich hockey players, that typical thing. And he's like, I don't need an assistant. But then he changes his mind because he feels bad for this dog that he found. He takes the dog home. He realizes it's a big responsibility. He needs to hire an assistant. He hires Pippa Hartley, which she is the female main character. Essentially, they knew each other in high school, so they were secret crushes on each other. He liked her, she liked him, something like that, but they never got together. They just had crushes on each other, and they knew each other a little bit, but they weren't friends, or they didn't get together back in high school. So Pippa was a singer, or she had a boyfriend who was an up-and-coming pop singer or whatever, but he ends up breaking her heart, so she is left with nothing. She has to go live with her sister, who her sister works for the Vancouver Vipers, the hockey team, and recommends her. So to get a marketing assistant job, or marketing associate, I think is what the job title is, she has to start at the bottom and work her way up, and the hockey team only hires in-house people, so that's how she gets her in. And it's just a really cute story, and I really enjoyed reading it. 3.5 stars. Cute hockey romance. I think I took so long reading Behind the Net because I was anxiously awaiting the third book in the Knock 'em Out series, Things We Left Behind. I did read it on my Kindle as soon as it came out, but I did also order the paperback, and it came in. I accidentally bought the UK version when I bought Things We Never Got Over. So essentially, ever since then, to make them all match, I have to buy the UK version, the hotter publishing house ones. So they look like this, and they have sparkles. You can see the two back here. This used to be sitting up there, but since I need it for this video, I took it out, so they look pretty good together, all their spines match. So this book, the third book in the Knock 'em Out series. I've been waiting for Sloane and Lucian's book, like everyone else, since the beginning, since they were mentioned in Things We Never Got Over. This is such a good series. It was one of the first books that I read on my Kindle when I got my Kindle and Kindle Unlimited back in February. And ever since then, I've been reading the books. And I do love them so much. Some people don't like them, some people love them so much. It just depends, but I'm one of the ones who love this book series. The characters, the writing, the mystery subplots they have in it. So throughout the series, you see Sloane and Lucian, and they're always at each other's throats. They hate each other so much, and I've always wanted to understand why. So thankfully it explains it into here. The only thing that I didn't like is it doesn't really go much in depth. You see other plot points in this story other than like Lucian and Sloane's like story and like stuff. You think you have to wait like a few chapters or quite a bit of chapters to finally figure out what is going on. A lot of stuff takes place in this book that could have been like left out, and I think that's just the thing with Lucy Score's writing. She puts so much into her book. I mean, look at how thick that is. It took me a few days to get through this. I think it might have took me 3 or 4 days to finally finish this on my Kindle because it just was so long, so drawn out. But the ending made up for it. The last few chapters always do. I gave it a 4 stars. I would say more about the story, but I don't want to spoil it because it is the third book in the series. I do love all the characters, how it comes in at the end. So next book that I read was also on my Kindle at the time, and that is Accidentally Amy by Lynn Painter. I knew I really wanted to read this book during fall, and I did. It has mentions of pumpkin spice, and I was intrigued by that, and I do love Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter, so I thought I would really love this. Unfortunately, I didn't. I gave it a 3 stars. It wasn't like too bad, but it was like very cliche and the characters were very corny, and I think that's how she writes, but I liked it better in her other book that I read. So I don't know, it involves Amy, but her name is not really Amy. Her name is Isabella, which you call her Izzy, and it's not Amy. She goes to a Starbucks and she is waiting in line. She is already late for her first day of work, and this Amy person just does not come in. Like, she like ordered a pumpkin spice latte and she's nowhere to be found. So out of frustration, Izzy grabs the drink and then she runs into her boss, which at the time she does not know is her boss, and spills her PSL all over him, and it's like a cute meet cute, which was really fun. And I do like the premise of the story, so of course like he figures out that she's not Amy and all this kind of stuff, and of course he feels betrayed that she lied to him. I gave it a 3 stars. It was like a cute like fall read, but it really didn't like, I didn't pay much attention to it. Like, I don't know. The next book that I picked up was What Happens After Midnight by K.L. Walther, and this was such a cute book. I love The Summer of Broken Rules. That was so good. I read it last summer, so I really wanted to read this one, and I thought essentially this would be like the perfect fall book, but it doesn't take place in fall. It takes place the beginning of summer because it's almost the school end. The beginning really reminds me of Gilmore Girls. It like has Gilmore Girl vibes because she is a young mom who moved to this boarding school with this like young toddler, so it kind of reminded me like of Lorelai going to the hotel, and then like she raises her kid up in this school. So Lily, our main character, she lives on the premises of the boarding school because her mom is a teacher there. And like the beginning, as I said, it's just very Gilmore Girls vibe. Young mom, teenager, and then I think her mom is dating like the cook of the school, so it's like giving Luke Danes. So that's why I really love this book. Also, the amount of Taylor Swift references in this book. I mean, the guy's name in this book is Taggart Swell, so I feel like she did that so it could be like Taylor Swift. I don't know, that's what I was thinking in my head. So the guy, Tag, he is the jester. There's this like tradition at this boarding school where you pull off a school prank, and he is like the jester, and he pulls off this elaborate prank, and he ropes Lily into it because of course her mom is part of the faculty. She is like a frat brat, or I think that's what they call it, because she has a mom on the faculty. And it just leads you through the different like clues, and it has like this mystery, and Lily and Tag used to date each other, and it's like second chance romance. It's really cute. I love this story and really enjoyed it. I loved the premise of it. Like, it was just so cute. It just did not take place in fall, so if you're wanting to read this in fall, it does give fall vibes, but it's technically the beginning of summer. I did not know that when going into this, but I still enjoyed it. 4-star read. Next book I read is The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston, and I gave this 5 stars. This is one of my favorite books that I read this month. So this time last year I read Ashley Poston's The Dead Romantics, and I really remember enjoying that one so much. It was just amazing. So I didn't know if it would live up to that, but this one did. It certainly did. So we have Clementine, who is our female main character. She lives in her aunt's apartment, who sadly passes away. She inherits this apartment in New York. It has the New York setting. She lives there. She works at a publishing house, and I love when they work in like book publishing. She works there. She has so many female friends at the company. It was a very chick lit type story. I didn't know that when going into this, but she is turning 30 soon, and I just turned 30, so I related a lot to Clementine and what she's going through. I love the magicalness of this book. So it's still real life, but it has this like teeny tiny magical element, and that magical element is her apartment goes back 7 years. So sometimes you'll go into your apartment and you're in present day. Some days you'll walk in and you're 7 years behind. So I thought that was so cool. Like, I love when stories have that little bit of magic. She comes in one day and she's 7 years in the past, and she's wondering what's going on. Like, she discovers there's this man in the apartment, and of course you're gonna be scared that there is a man in your apartment when you live alone. He then explains he knows her aunt and that she let him stay there while they were supposed to be on vacation, which the timeline, yes, she is supposed to be on vacation, but like it switches over, and it's technically like you have to read it to understand like the timeline of it. So Iwan is like an up and coming like chef. He moves to New York to become a chef, so he has to start at the bottom as a dishwasher and then climbs to the top. So it's really cute. You get to see them in the past, but technically it's her current, and it's just really wacky. You have to read it to find out. I'm not doing a good job at explaining it, but like the little clues that lead up to the timeline, I loved it. The nickname he gives her is the cutest thing in the world, and I did not realize that when I was first reading it. It's like when everything was going on, I started to connect the dots, and I'm like, oh, I get it. That is the cutest thing in the world. So you like see little clues like from the past coming into like the future or the current time, and I hope I'm telling you about this like right, because I love this book. This was one of the books that I just could not put down. I read it in one sitting. I loved this book and just the whole story of it. So Ashley Poston is becoming like my auto-buy author. Whatever she writes, I am going to buy. I'm reading it during September because that has been like my tradition, and I love this book. 5 stars. Really highly recommend you read it, especially during this time of year. It's just perfect. After reading 2 physical books, I moved on to another Kindle Unlimited book, which is Funny Feelings by Terra Dewit. I hope I'm saying that right. If not, sorry about that. Cannot pronounce authors' names for the life of me. But I gave this 3 stars. I wasn't a fan of this. I don't know, maybe it's because I was just getting off of a high with the 7-year slip, so nothing would compare to that book. It like this book right here kind of put me in a slump. It is about a comedian, or yeah, stand-up comedian. She does like comedy bars, and I love the premise of it. Like everything, it is like a fake dating kind of thing, because she has to fake date her manager because she's gonna go on this stand-up comedian tour with 2 other female stand-up comedians, and she needs to like have a relationship to like boost things. You know, in Hollywood you have to like have a fake PR relationship to get somewhere apparently, and she could have picked like an actor or like someone up and coming, but everyone wants to know about her manager, who used to be a stand-up comedian as well, but just stopped and did not like become a comedian fully. He just like now manages talent, which the only talent he manages is Harley Jones, and then his name is Mayor. I think that's how you say it. So he agrees to it, even though he kind of like reluctantly not wants to. You know how that happens. And he's a very like private, quiet guy. He has a daughter, so it's like single dad trope. His daughter is deaf, and thankfully Farley knows sign language, so that's how like they get into it. And then he slowly starts falling for her, and they get together, and it's a really cute story. I don't know why I didn't really like enjoy it at the time. I think it was just the wrong time for me to read it right after it, because I know a lot of people love this book. So I don't know. That is my rating. I gave it a 3 stars. Next, we're getting into my fall fantasy reads. So I did a reading vlog on a lot of these books actually. So if you want to check that out, I'll leave all the videos down below where I read these books and I give some more thoughts about it like along the way. This one was a highly anticipated read for me, and I finally crossed it off my TBR, and that is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yaros. It was so amazing. I loved it. It was another 5-star read for me. I see the hype. I truly get it now. The dragons, the characters, Violet, Xaden. I loved it so much. I did a full reading vlog where you can see my reactions and I talk more about it. But Violet has to go to this school and train as a dragon rider because her mom is the commander, but she is very weak and like she does not have the body type for to become a dragon rider. Everyone is saying that she'll never make it. She's only meant to be part of like the library squad, as I call it. It's something else. I think it's called the scribe quadrant, but I call it the library squad. So she is meant to be there, and all her life she's trained for that. But at the last minute, her mom forces her, because she's the commander-in-chief, to go to the rider quadrant where she has to learn how to ride a dragon. The dragon picks you, and I love the dragons in this book. Yes, they make it amazing. The chemistry between Xaden and Violet, highly recommend it, as everyone else on every platform does, because it is such a good book. Really, it is. So 5 stars to Fourth Wing. I'm glad that I finally read it. The next book that I read is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross, and I read these 2 books back to back. I thought I would regret reading them back to back because they're such highly anticipated fantasy reads, and I was going to be like, I liked Fourth Wing so much. Am I going to like enjoy Divine Rivals, especially after reading that? And especially after I read The 7-Year Slip, and then it put me into like a reading slump a little bit because I didn't enjoy Funny Feelings. I thought that was going to happen with these 2 books, but thankfully it did not. I love this book. Again, it was so good. Iris and Roman and like the magical typewriter, and she is a journalist for the Oath Gazette, so it takes place like in historical times a little bit. She lives at home with her mom, and her brother just went to war, and it isn't like the war you're expecting. It isn't like World War II. It is the War of Gods, sorry. And like these two gods are like fighting. It has like mythological aspects, so if you like that, that is in here. I really didn't understand like the politics and the war and stuff with it, so I don't know, it maybe just was a me thing. But Iris goes to work for the paper. She drops out of school. She is this brilliant writer, and she like writes these beautiful things, and her competitor is Roman. So they fight for the position to be a columnist at the local paper, and they are like work rivals. She doesn't know that she is writing Roman letters. She thinks she is writing her brother Forrest letters through this like magical typewriter that she puts through her like wardrobe, and it like sends it off to him, which is really cool. I love like all the magical aspects of that. So I gave it a 5 stars, but the ending to this book frustrated me to no end. So if you saw my reading vlog, you saw my reaction to that. But I cannot wait. I need to read both the second book in Fourth Wing and Divine Rivals because they're just that good. And I love this book, and I'm glad that I read them back to back. I can cross this off of my TBR as well. Right after those 2 books, I started Thriller Reading Week, which was my last video, I believe. So yeah, you can watch that as well. I read a lot of thriller books, so if you want to see my full reaction to all these books, then I will link that down below. But the next book that I read, or the first book that I read to start Thriller Week, was Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. So this was me diving in to the thriller genre, and honestly, I really enjoyed it. 4 stars. So the main character, Laurel, her daughter goes missing, and it's a few years later, I don't know how many years, I forgot now. Her life falls apart pretty much. She doesn't move on from like losing her daughter who goes missing, because of course that seems so hard, like to have your daughter go missing and just move on in life. But finally she's becoming happier. Like she finds this guy and who like treats her good, and she just feels like so happy again until like she meets his 2 daughters. So his 2 daughters, he has one from one marriage and then one from the other. He has like a 9-year-old, and he like introduces her one day to his 9-year-old, and she's like taken aback by this, and like she for some reason like looks like her daughter. She doesn't understand why she looks like her daughter or whatever. So it's really twisted, and you see what happens. I didn't really guess what happened. I kind of did, but I wasn't correct in that aspect. So the plot twist of this is so good, and I really enjoyed reading it. Like I was really intrigued by it. I was like into the story, like how everything came to be, and I really liked it. So highly recommend. 4 stars for Then She Was Gone. Next book that I read is The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley, and this one was an okay read. I gave it 3 stars. It wasn't as exciting as Then She Was Gone, but I did like the book enough to keep reading because I wanted to find out who did it. It's one of those who done it kind of books where you'll have to figure out who did it. I didn't really connect the dots. I didn't really guess what was going to happen, so that's good. So Jess is going to the Paris apartment because she was under some trouble. So I think they live in London as well, or somewhere in England, and she goes to Paris where her half-brother is staying in this apartment. And so she just called him up one night saying, hey, I need to go to your place, like I'm coming right now, leave the door open for me, or something like that. So she goes, and like she stands there in the cold, and she's wondering why her brother is not answering. Like she just talked to him like a few hours ago while she was on the train or plane or whatever you get to Paris with from London. So she just stands in the cold, and then she finally makes her way into the apartment and finds her brother is missing. And you'll just go through the different characters who live in the Paris apartment, about how her brother went missing, and you'll see that. So there is Nick, Mimi, Sophie, everyone who lives in the Paris apartment. You get their point of views on what happened to the brother, and you finally figure it out. It was a satisfying ending. I did enjoy it. Just some of the characters and stuff weren't like too interesting, so I had to push through that, but overall it was an okay story. Then we move on to A Flicker in the Dark by Stacy Willingham. I read this on my Kindle as well because it's on Kindle Unlimited. I love going back and forth, so I read this in one sitting. This really intrigued me. So the main character, which is Dr. Chloe Davis, she is a psychiatrist, and she moves to not New Orleans, somewhere in Louisiana. What was it called? Baton Rouge, I think is how you say it. So she is from a little small town in Louisiana, and her dad is accused and convicted of killing six teenage girls 20 years ago. So she has to like live with the guilt of that, and like her father is like this monster, and she moves away and starts her life, but she's still traumatized by what happened to her. I mean, obviously, who wouldn't be, right? And it's just a really sick and twisted like thriller, and I kind of guessed what happened in this. It was kind of obvious who done it, another who done it kind of thriller, but there was like a added plot twist that like to give you the shock factor, but obviously it wasn't a shock to me because I kind of already figured out who did it, because after 20 years again, there was 2 girls who went missing and got killed. So it's like she's remembering what happened 20 years ago, but her like dad's in jail, so that can't be happening. So it's really sick, really twisted. I really enjoyed reading it. So good. I gave it a 4 stars. Then we move on to another Kindle book. So I read 2 books on Kindle Unlimited, The Housemaid as well as The Housemade Secret. But first we're going to talk about The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. This is everywhere on my book talk, everywhere on my YouTube channel. Like, I see this book so much. I finally sat down to read it, and it is worth the hype. I did enjoy it. I hated the characters in this book, so that makes it such a good book to me when I physically cannot stand a character in this book. I hated Nina Winchester. So Millie is like out of prison. She gets out of prison and she needs like somewhere to work. So she applies to become a maid at this rich people's house in New York. Again, a New York setting. I love it. It's really good writing if I really like hated her, and like the plot twist with what happens in this book is just wild, and I'm like, oh my goodness. And then the end was like crazy to me, but like it was such a good book. I gave it 4 stars. Like everything about it was like so good. I understand the hype about this one. I read so many hyped up books this month, and I really enjoyed that. Of course, I couldn't not read The Housemade Secret, the second book in this series, and I just heard that they might have a 3rd one come out. There was something on Instagram, so yay, at least I read the 2 books now, that if the 3rd one comes out, I know what like is going on. So the second one is very familiar to the first one. It still stars Millie, and she's cleaning for a different family. She is cleaning for this like tech guy penthouse who has a wife who never comes out of the bedroom. So something goes down there. She finds it like weird and creepy that like his wife doesn't come out, and then something happens within that, and I did not see what was happening coming, thankfully. So I was like really like into it, and I really hated the character in this one as well. So I love Frida McFadden's writing, that she can make me hate someone so much. So I loved it. I gave it a 4 stars as well, and like everything that went down with this one. Great, my camera died, so at least I finished that book. So the last book that I read during Thriller Week is actually a 5-book series. It is the Mind F series by St. Abbey, and this one I binged in a whole weekend. Like, I just spent the whole weekend reading all 5 of these books. So it's on Kindle Unlimited, and each book is like 15 or so chapters, and like you can read it in like an hour and a half, 2 hours. That's what I did. And every book ends on a cliffhanger, and you have no choice but to read the next book. The main female character, Lana Myers, she is a serial killer. She kills people, but she doesn't just kill like people. She kills people who did her wrong. She is a revenge killer. She is getting revenge for what happened to her 10 years ago. She is a morally gray character, but you are rooting for her the whole time. She ends up meeting Logan Bennett at a coffee shop, and he is an FBI agent, FBI profiler, whatever you call it, and a serial killer and an FBI agent. You would think, like, you know? So you follow both their stories. You find out why Lana is doing these revenge killings. I just love this book series so much. All the characters in it, every twist and turn that happened, like, I love this series so much. It is going to live rent-free in my head. Like, I love this book series, all 5 books. I gave this whole series a 5 stars. Like, it was amazing. Like, every single like page I was like, what's gonna happen? Oh my goodness. Like, all this. If you love Dexter and like Criminal Minds and shows like that, this is what that gives me. I like saw it in my head play out, and I just spent my whole entire weekend on my living room couch binge reading this. I loved it so much, and I couldn't wait to do this reading wrap up to tell you how much I love this book series. Moving on from that book, I read Hooked by Emily McIntyre. I still don't know how to say it, but I read this right after the Mind F series, and I thought I would be put into a reading slump again because it was just so good and I couldn't get over that book. But I'm glad that I read Hooked right after it because it gives like similar vibes a little bit. This was a dark romance. So this is me dipping my toes into dark romance. I mean, technically the Mind F series was me like diving into it. This was like nothing compared to that. It is a retelling of like Peter Pan essentially. So it has Hook, Peter Pan, Wendy, Smee, Tinkerbell, all that. They're just different names in this book, except Smee. He is for some reason still called Smee, but it is very dark. It is something that I never thought I would read. I love fairy tales. Who knew I would like dark fairy tales? And I know fairy tales have dark meanings anyways. This was just on a whole nother level. So Wendy Darling, Wendy Michaels is her name. She is the daughter of Peter Michaels, who essentially is Peter Pan. So he is like this rich businessman. Peter like owns this like airline company called Neverland Air, I believe is what it's called. So it has like the references of the fairy tale in it. And she is going to turn 21. They move from Florida to Massachusetts, I believe. He is called Hook for a whole entire different reason. And they go to the Jolly Roger, which isn't a boat. He does have a boat, but it isn't called a Jolly Rancher. The Jolly Rancher. The Jolly Roger is a club, and he owns the club, and it's much darker. There's drugs, there's alcohol, there's really dark stuff in this book. But I still enjoyed it. Loved it so much. So gave it a 4 stars. It was the perfect book to transition from the Mind F series to this. If I read something else after that, I probably wouldn't have liked it. But I liked this, and I love my choice of reading right after the other. So pretty good. I am definitely going to continue the Never After series. After reading Hooked, I read Belladonna by Adeline Grace, and this was a pretty good book. I gave it a 4 stars. It was okay. I was a little bit bored in like the beginning, but finally towards the middle it picked up. There is a mystery of like whodunit. So Signa is the main character. She, everywhere she goes, like, she experiences death around her. Like, no matter what she does, just death follows her around. And death is actually a person. The Grim Reaper, like, is a physical person in this book. She can, like, communicate with him, talk with him, and stuff like that. So a lot of people in her life are dying, but finally she moves to this manor, and she lives with, like, a distant cousin, I believe, and stuff is happening in this manor. It had, like, a lot of these, like, fantasy elements, and, like, I love, like, the vibe of it. It was, like, very gothic and dark and just perfect for fall time. Like, the atmosphere in this, like, reading this just was so good for the fall. So I did really enjoy this book. The next book that I read was on my Kindle, and it is The Simple Wild by K.A. Tucker, and this was such a good book. I ruined my sleep schedule for this book. I did not go to bed. I just wanted to finish this book in one sitting, and that I did. I took an afternoon nap after I got done reading it, but this was worth it to screw up my sleeping schedule. It was so good. Calla Fletcher just lost her job at a bank. She lives in Toronto, but she's originally from this small town in Alaska. But as a toddler, her mom moves her to Toronto because she just could not handle her husband. So she takes her daughter and they move to Toronto, and Calla grows up without her father. She gets this call that her dad is diagnosed with lung cancer, and she does not have a very good relationship with her dad. Something happens between her and him like a few years back. She's never been to this area. Her mom warns her, like, it is nothing like you've ever seen. You won't like it with your lifestyle. You'll hate it there. And then Jonah comes in, who is one of the pilots for her dad's Alaska, what was it called? Alaska Wild Company. They are an airplane charter service. So they fly out. There's like an airport in her town, and her dad owns this like business. Jonah is the most grumpiest guy. Like, I've read about a lot of grumpy guys in these books, but this one takes the cake. He is just so, like, borderline rude. That's how grumpy he is. So at first I hated him so much. I didn't think I would like him. I didn't think there would be like character development, but of course there is, and everything within this story, without giving spoilers, was just so good. This was a great book. Loved it. 5 stars. It just made my heart like really. It broke a lot of the times. I cried I don't know how many times with this book, but it was so good. Then we have the next book, the one I picked up right after The Simple Wild, which is Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mayer. And this one was pretty good. I hear so much hate about this one book, and I don't know why, because it is pretty good. I mean, it does have like cliche, corny writing, and maybe the writing in it isn't the best, but I still liked it. I gave it a 4 stars. The only thing that annoyed me with it was how many times they called the villain, the villain, the villain. That's the only thing that I didn't really like. My favorite character is Kingsley. He's a frog. That's all I'll say about that. He made the book for me. Some people I heard hated him so much, but I loved him. I like books like this. It was like the opposite of a fairy tale, and I love that. So it wasn't a dark fairy tale either. I mean, it is a little bit, but like, I just love this genre of book, apparently. Like, after Hooked, this really got me. Like, this is such a good, like, book to me. And I did not watch the TikTok series. Apparently there is one. I mean, if I've stumbled upon it, I would have liked it because it's so good. So Evie becomes the assistant to the villain, and she works for him, and he is the villain for a reason. He's the town villain, and it is one of those like medieval times or whatever. There's a king, and it like reminds me of Once Upon a Time a little bit. So I love that in books. It was good, and like the ending to this really? I need book 2 now. I need to know what happens. But like, you just see the villain become a person. He isn't just the villain. He has a name, but everyone calls him the villain. I'm not gonna spoil it. If you read it, you'll find out his name. Don't worry. Like, I thought we were just gonna call him the villain the whole time. But no, he has a name. But I loved all the characters in this. Like, it was found family. Like, the villain's lair had like a found family, and even the villain got involved, and Evie, and then the healer was there, and just everything about this book. I liked it. I enjoyed reading it. I gave it a 4 stars. And then that leads me to the last book that I read in September. I finished it 10 minutes before midnight on the 30th, so I'm still counting it that I read it in September, and I'm thankful that I did. And that is If He Had Been With Me by Laura Nolan. I think that's how you say it. I liked it. I gave it a 3 stars, though it wasn't like my cup of tea. It was very YA. I didn't relate with the characters. It's about like high school and these 2 characters who are childhood friends, and you see everything from first year to the last year of high school, and just their character development and how they like get together. And it technically is supposed to be sad because of how it ends. It was a very abrupt ending. Like, it didn't make me cry. I know some people it like made them bawl their eyes out, but to me, I kind of expected it to come. I just read it because it was very hyped up. It's been on my TBR for a while, but I didn't really like enjoy it too much. But I did read it, finished it before the end of the month, so that was the 19th book that I read, and all 19 books I read in September. That is it. I will link everything that I mentioned down below, including my book talk, my bookstagram. All my social medias will be down there if you want to check it out and see more content from me. I do hope you enjoyed watching. Please give me a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll talk to you in my next video. Bye everyone! And here we have the fun part of me lifting up the books that I read in September. I did it! Man, this is heavy. And it's not falling over, thank goodness. It's pretty sturdy this month. I successfully put it down without dropping it. First time it didn't fall over on me.